Hey everybody, what's going on? It's James here with Crypto Common Sense, and I have your Bitcoin/cryptocurrency update for Wednesday, August the 19th. Before I jump into the content for this video, please do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and of course make sure you check the description for a link where you can join the Patron. That'll give you access to more frequent updates and also helps to support the channel and keep these videos coming. So the first thing I actually want to talk about today, I'm going to go through several different charts and we'll just kind of see how things line up. I'm not sure how long the video will be. It might be 20 minutes, it might be 45 minutes. We'll just see how it goes. But the first thing that I really want to talk about is actually going to be this larger time frame Bitcoin chart. Now this is a weekly Bitcoin chart, and if you all remember, I've been watching this downward sloping resistance on RSI, and what I said was if we could break and close above that line, I think the bulls basically have to take a seat. Bears, right? People like me who are still thinking that this is all manipulated move, blah, 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 right? So far we haven't broke above it, but what we have done, I'm gonna get rid of all these fibs and everything, and I'll go through the stuff one by one. What we have done is we started to put in exactly the type of candle that I would want to see as a bear, not as a bull, but as a bear. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when you come up to these lines of resistance, Bitcoin or support, right? If you're going down it's support, but if you're coming up it's resistance. Bitcoin will often throw a wick up, right? To trap the bulls, so to speak, and then it will move down. And just like when it's going down to support, it will often throw a tail down, kind of like this here. It slides down through support, it traps the bears who get, basically rush in, and then it pumps and crushes the bears in this case. In a case like this, kind of like we saw back here, it traps the bulls and then it crushes the bulls. So I really like seeing that stuff when it's right at resistance. And if you want a perfect example of this, this is it. So we had this trend line, it started back here. Right here we had our second touch, so we could draw a trend line. Right here it came up and tested it again, barely slipped above it, and at the same time, basically what you got was you got this wick right here, okay? And then that was actually a place that you could have gone short. Not the greatest short entry in the world because you would have had to have a pretty big stop loss depending on your trading style. It's 20% stop loss, so the position would have been fairly small if you're shorting that. But you could, right? Threw another wick up to try to stop those bears out and to try to trap those bulls, and then down it went. So that's what I'm watching. We closed last week right on that line, but I did not short Bitcoin when we closed last week. And by last week, I mean 3 days ago, because there was no wick to speak of. There was no capitulation wick. Back here, these capitulation tails, that's where the bulls are capitulating and giving up their longs. What I want to see if I want to get bearish and if I want to get short on the smaller time frames, what I want to see is a wick, right? I want to see a wick where the bears finally capitulate, say, screw it, I guess I'm wrong, I'll go long, and then the market dumps. So I would highly recommend to keep an eye on this and see, is this going to close this week above this line, or is this going to turn back down? Because we did get a bit of a wick here. It's not the biggest wick in the world, but it is a wick, right? And if it closes down further, of course, that would be even more sign that this run is at least due for a correction. It doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin's suddenly going to go back down to $3,000 or $4,000 or anything. Right now, I think that again, globally things look terrible. I expect that globally things are going to come unraveled sooner rather than later. But it's kind of like if you sit and wait and wait and wait and wait, you'll miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I think the best thing to do right now is this is kind of trade what the market is giving, which is, it's very bullish, right? Whether it's a new bull market remains to be seen, but it is bullish. And this is definitely a well-established uptrend going back for 5 months. So I think at this point you have to assume, of course, safely, stop losses, all that kind of stuff. But I think you have to assume that if this does start to pull back, it's probably a correction, right? And a correction often in Bitcoin's case will go back down to the golden pocket, which is going to be down around $6,800 to $7,100, which would be basically retesting this old base back here, okay? Now, the reason you have to use stop losses, the reason you have to use technical analysis to look for those entries versus just guessing is because it may get down there and it may reveal itself through the charts that, hey, this is not a correction, this is actually a crash. And then, of course, you wouldn't want to be going long through here. But assuming the market behaves normally, which is kind of an odd word for Bitcoin, there's no normal, but assuming nothing crazy happens like this back here, I may be looking to add a small amount, and I mean a small amount, maybe 2 Bitcoin, right? Maybe 3 Bitcoin if I'm really feeling exuberant, but probably maybe 1 or 2 Bitcoin if we get back down to this area. And the main reason that I want to add Bitcoin is because I'd like to be able to trade some Bitcoin pairs. And I've kind of decided that the best thing I can do is probably buy, a small amount of Bitcoin, 1 or 2 Bitcoin maybe, and then not even worry about its US dollar value. Just completely ignore its USD value and simply trade with the goal of stacking Satoshis. Because the reality is I've seen a lot of really good alt setups, but because I don't have any Bitcoin to trade with, all I have is that hedge fund, right? Which I don't want to be moving in and out of because it resets the capital gains every time you do that. So what I'm thinking is I'll probably buy a little bit of Bitcoin specifically to trade with. And then if I buy it at $7,000 and it drops to $2,000, that's going to suck, but that's the way it goes, right? I'll just be stacking Satoshis and looking at the long-term picture. Again, depending on what's going on, I can't say for sure I'll do that. If the stock market is crashing and gold is crashing and everything's crashing, I would probably just play it safe and maybe buy 1 Bitcoin, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes when it gets down to that area. If it even gets there, we don't know if it will, right? This could just be a pause and then further upside. So keep that in mind. Also, guys, I want to remind you that, and I've said this in the past, but I want to really, really drive this point home. I don't have a crystal ball. Most of the trading that I do is really level to level trading, right? So I'm not trying to, for example, short back here and then ride it all the way down. And I'm not trying to long back here and ride it all the way up, right? What I'm usually doing on my trading is I'm usually just playing it level to level, going for these small wins, 1% day trades or 2% day trades. Or if I'm going on a swing trade, maybe 4 or 5% swing trades. It's very rare that I'm going to ride something all the way up or all the way down. There's a few exceptions to that. For example, I shorted Litecoin at, I can't remember now, it was last year. I had 111, I think, or something like that was my average. And I did ride that all the way down. And what that was is that wasn't the type of short where you actually go bet against it and you're paying funding and things like that. That was actually a long-term position that I had on Litecoin where it was, I'll just tell you because who cares? I don't have it anymore. But it was like 200 and some odd Litecoin, 269 Litecoin if I remember right? So it's like 25 grand or 30 grand worth of Litecoin. And so I never bought it back, right? And I'm still waiting to buy it back and I still plan on buying it back. But so far I haven't. And I don't know what Litecoin's price is right now. I haven't looked lately. It's probably $60 or something. So like if you look at that one trade, that's a trade that I wrote down, right? It's like $50 times whatever that is. It's like $13,000-$14,000 profit, right? It's like I could buy those Litecoin back now for 13 or 14 grand less than I sold them for. Now, of course, could have bought them back for even less back in March. But I just didn't feel good about the long-term position. So once in a while, I'll take those types of position trades. Normally not that large. I'm just a fan of Litecoin. But overall, I'm usually not doing that. Usually I'm playing the smaller moves in the smaller time frames. And it really has to do with the fact that when I'm trading with significant amounts of money, right? And that's a different thing to everybody, but to me what I'm using is significant, and so I don't want to be stuck in a market when I'm away from the desk or when I'm sleeping overnight or things like that. So for me it makes more sense to get in and get out, because just as an example, if I could afford to lose $1, right, if I left that in the market, I might make some returns on that $1. But if I'm getting in and out of the market and not leaving it in and I'm using stop losses, I might be able to risk $10, right, or 10 to 1. So it allows me to make more money doing that. But the reason I say that is because, obviously this market has pumped a lot. And regardless of whether it goes back down, let's say hypothetically that it goes down to $1,000. There will be those people who are like, wow, James, you're right. But the reality is right or wrong, I played this whole move wrong, right? I played it wrong. I mean, point blank, I've been waiting for this, horrific crash to come. And there's a lot of trade opportunities that I could have taken, even being a bear. And I was showing my Discord a lot of these trades that I should have took based on TA, not based on hindsight, but just like, okay, look, here's a proper entry, here's a proper setup. I didn't take it. And the reality is I was wrong. Whether it goes down or not doesn't matter. I was wrong, right? Actually, I didn't play this move correctly. And that really comes down to letting my bias taint my decision-making process. And I was explaining this to them yesterday. Sometimes you get, like, there's two sides of this emotional coin, right? So when you first start out with trading, the emotional side is FOMO, because you don't really know how to trade, so you feel like you've got to catch the move. You got to get lucky, basically, because you don't know how to make consistent money trading. So that causes you to chase a lot, where you're chasing these trades, and you usually end up losing money because of that. On the flip side, though, it can swing the other way, where once you are, making consistent money trading, once you are feel pretty good about it, you can almost become complacent in the fact that, you know what, I don't love that one, I'll wait for the next one. I don't love that trade, I'll wait for the next one. And because you feel like you can make money anytime, so to speak, and I'm not saying like millions of dollars, but you can consistently make returns, sometimes it becomes really easy to skip trades that you don't feel the best about. And if you do that, before you know it, you haven't traded in a month or 2 months. And that's basically what I did. I basically took the summer off. And don't get me wrong, I had lots of fun. I enjoyed my time outside. I enjoyed the time away from the desk. But still, there was a lot of money to be made. And I let my complacency and my bias get the best of me. So, just keep that in mind, right? When you're watching my channel, I'm a very bearish biased person. I'm not a macro bull on Bitcoin anymore. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. I think that when it crashed in March, that it basically revealed itself to be worthless. And, let me kind of give you the 30-second spiel on that. What I mean by that is, supposedly early Bitcoin was going to be money, right? And everybody realizes at this point, Bitcoin's not ever going to be money, right? It doesn't work well for transactional value. So then it became, okay, well, Bitcoin is a store of value. It's quote unquote digital gold. Well, the stock market crashed about 30% back in March. And when it did, Bitcoin fell over 50% in one day. So that store of value, that narrative, was completely demolished. And that's when I stopped being a macro bull on Bitcoin. Up until that point, if you watch the channel, you know that I had said forever that when it gets to 4,200, I'm going to load up. And the plan was all along to buy somewhere between 10 and 20 Bitcoin. That was the plan. When it gets to 4,200, I hadn't decided for sure. I had an order in for 10, but I thought I might double down and buy 20. I didn't buy anywhere near that much. I think I bought like a quarter Bitcoin or something to hold that I added to my little hedge fund, and that was it, right? A pittance, less than $1,000 worth. And the reason is because it killed my my confidence in Bitcoin. I still have the hedge fund in case I'm wrong, right? The one that's made up of alts and Bitcoin, and its value kind of fluctuates between like 1.8 and 2.2. I think yesterday it actually ran up, or the day before it ran up to like 2.35, but now it's back down to like 2.2, right? I have that in case I'm wrong, but I'm not a big believer in Bitcoin long term. I think this destroyed its credibility. So for me, that's the reason that I'm not, I no longer have this plan of buying 10 or 20 Bitcoin or any of that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind, because when you're watching my channel, that does definitely play into, how I analyze these things and how I feel about it. I'm much more interested in trading it from, this level to that level versus, stocking up on a ton of Bitcoin and, riding it to the moon someday. All right. So that was kind of a lengthy explanation of this weekly chart, but I felt like it was important because, I did get a comment a few weeks ago that really, really bothered me, and it didn't make me angry. It was my biggest fear, right? Somebody commented that they had lost money because of me. Now, that's not true. Obviously, everybody's responsible for their own actions, right? I didn't make anybody do anything, and I try to emphasize that I'm not a financial advisor. But still, my biggest fear was that somebody would make a decision because of something I said, and then that they would somehow come back and blame me for it. And not even so much because they're blaming me, because I don't care, because it's really not my fault, and I understand that. But I hate that people missed out on some of this because they were putting too much faith in the things I was saying, because they didn't understand that, my macro view doesn't necessarily change the fact that I can still day trade and still swing trade and all that kind of stuff, even though in this case it didn't, right? I took a couple months off. So enough about that. I don't want to ramble too much on it. Let's jump over to a, I want to look at a daily chart next, I think. Is this my daily? No, that's my 6 hour. Okay, so here's my daily chart, and we're going to go through this kind of piece by piece, all right? So this top line up here, this is kind of the line that I would call, I think it's being a little bit generous to the bulls, right? I think really this up here was the top of the triangle, right? But being generous, we'll say, okay, well, this close over here, we'll call that, you know, support or resistance, whatever. And it broke through here, came down, and right now, look at this. It threw this tail all the way down to the bottom of this trend line, and now it's bouncing back up above this resistance. So I think right now it's really, really dangerous to play this thing, because if you're a bull, this could have been a fake breakout to trap you. But if you're a bear, I mean, technically we're still above support, right? And what you really want to see on an ascending triangle, you really want to see it break north, yes, but you do want to see it come back down and test support before further upside. So I think it's really, really important not to get, you know, too far ahead of ourselves right now, regardless of which side of the fence you're on, because there's really no clear direction on this on a daily chart, right? When I look at my trend line on RSI, we're still above support, okay? And as far as a downward sloping resistance, we really don't have a clear line of resistance yet, right? It might be like this. This might be what we end up seeing, but that's only 2 points. So it's really tough to say until it comes back up to retest it, okay? That being said, you know, don't forget we have these nasty gaps sitting out here. This is a liquidity gap down around 10.1. We have this liquidity gap down around 7,800, and we have this smaller liquidity gap down around 5,400, okay? Kind of the same deal with retesting support. If you look at this, it was almost making an ascending triangle type of pattern. At the time, I thought it was a wedge, right? It looked more like a wedge, but it did break north of that regardless of whether it was a wedge or an ascending triangle. You know, it broke north. So once it broke north, what you want to see is really for it to come back down and test this level right here, and it didn't do that, right? So maybe that's what it's finally going to do, is come down and test that, hit that, you know, golden pocket area, and then move off of it, right? That golden pocket that I was just talking about on the weekly chart down here around 7,100 could absolutely move down, throw a tail down, and then move up, right? So that's something I would definitely keep an eye on. If we take a look at the 6-hour chart, this was that really steep line of support that was going on from, you know, back last week. It did break through it, came up for a bearish retest and moved down. So I think that's out of play now. But again, still above this really important line of support right here. That's the line that I would be watching, right? If you want to get bearish, you want to see that line break. As far as resistance and support in this thing, I haven't looked yet today. Really nothing there, right? It broke right through it. And as far as supports, we might have a line of support. Let's look how this plays out. Maybe, right? Maybe that was the support. I mean, it kind of goes in hand with this here. It came down, didn't quite get to support, but probably was touching it when it threw that tail down. Probably did touch it and bounce off of it. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I would be watching in this thing, and I shared this in Discord last week, so hopefully this helps some people out. This is the 50 moving average, this orange line, 50 moving average on the 4-hour chart. And Bitcoin, it loves to watch this 50 moving average on the daily, but here lately it's been doing it on the 4-hour. And if you were just playing this 50 moving average, there's a lot of money you can make off of trades, right? Hit it right here, bounced up. I mean, it depends on how long you wrote it, obviously. But it bounced off of it, hit it here, bounced off of it. This is a really good one here because it bounced up immediately, right? Like a 5% little day trade or swing trade. Through here is a little mucky, but over here hit it, right? Bounced up off of it. So from the close of this red candle over there, a couple of percent. Touched it here, bounced right up. Touched it here, bounced right up, broke through it, acted as resistance, acted as support, right? And then I was playing these, trading this quite a bit, this 50 moving average. Back here I was able to play it, and back here I think I was able to play it. I don't know for sure on that one. But you know, you start lining this 50 moving average up with other things. For example, look at this. Now you have a third touch on this RSI trend line, which is confirmation of an uptrend, right? You match that up with the fact that, hey, look, it just touched the 50 back here. Now you've got an entry point for a trade with a really obvious stop loss, about a 1% stop loss. You can take a fairly big position on that, and boom, right? Within 8 hours, this thing pumped over 5%. So that's kind of like the way, you know, when you start putting all these puzzle pieces together, you don't really need to care about where is Bitcoin going long term, because if you can make 5% even one time a week It's massive, massive returns, okay? But so far today, what I wanted to point out was, look, we've done this again. Not only did we test this 50, but we threw this huge tail down, right? And if you remember what I said at the beginning of the video, tails are typically capitulation events where bulls are giving up their long positions, okay? So for example, back here, there's this long tail, and then it pumped, I don't know, probably 1 or 2%, right? Yeah, 1.36% off the close and a little over 2% from the bottom. So I think if you're a bull, you want to watch this and make sure that it holds this 50. I think if you're a bear, you want to see this close underneath the 50 and, you know, kind of go from there. Basically right now, I think this is the level of support as far as price goes, right? Down around 11.5, 11.6. So again, you know, if it loses the 50, that's the next level that I would be watching. That's what I mean when I say trading level to level. What I'd really like to see as a bear, and this sounds counterintuitive, but if I wanted to go for a short entry, I wouldn't mind seeing this pump back up, test this from the inner side on a bearish retest, and then if I can find some other technical analysis factors to back it up, I might go get short there and then try to ride it down, right? Now, is it going to do that? I don't know, but I'm just saying that's the type of stuff. When I'm looking at these charts, most of trading is just waiting. Most of it's kind of identifying possibilities that might happen and then being ready so that if this happens, I'm not scurrying going, oh my God, what should I do? What should I do, right? I already know, okay, if this gets back to this line, I want to look for a short position, right? And I know that. So if it gets to the line, then there's no stress involved. There's no, you know, feeling of frenzy or panic. It's just execute the plan, okay? So I think it's enough about Bitcoin. Well, one other thing. Don't forget on Bitcoin that the CME still has that nasty open air gap. I'm sure you guys are aware of it, but just keep it in the back of your mind. There is this really nasty open air gap down around like 9,600 bucks. Also keep in mind that when you look at the CME, that it did a picture perfect double top, retest the double top. There's your short entry right there. Can't really draw an arrow very well, but there's the short entry, right? Could have wrote that down. Now, depending on how you trade, some people would try to write it down all the way, but again, me personally, when I trade like that, all I do is take the profit, right? Next day it was down 4 or 5% out of the trade and on to the next, okay? But we have bearish divergence. We have price going up, 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 RSI going down, 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 and that's, again, a bearish sign or a sign that the move is topping out. So keep that in mind. Probably forgetting something because I rambled a little bit at the beginning of the video, but that's okay. We'll move on from there. I want to stick to crypto for now. I'll jump to stocks in here in just a few minutes. But one of the other charts that I'm watching on crypto, I'm watching the total alt market cap. So I went over to the alt chart and looked at the total alt market cap, and there's this really beautiful channel, right? You get your touches here and up top here. So I'm kind of watching this channel now, and again, bearish divergence forming up. So the alts look pretty overbought, pretty severely overbought. So I'm expecting some type of correction on the alts versus Bitcoin, right? So if Bitcoin ends up correcting and then the alts overcorrect, I wouldn't be surprised to see my alts drop 30-40%, right? The golden pocket in this thing's down around 40% drop, down to about 82 billion. So I'm keeping an eye on that. And again, if we get there, I might finally buy a little bit of alts. And when I say buying this stuff, guys, I'm talking small bets, like 1%, 2%, maybe 3% of my portfolio into these long-term positions. I don't want to go out and put, a quarter of my portfolio into it because I'd rather have that money to trade with, and because there's just so much less stress involved, right? I did a post on Facebook, I think it was yesterday, and, I pointed out to people there that even though I'm bearish and even though I really don't believe in Bitcoin anymore, I do have the hedge fund. And if somebody came to me and asked me, hey, should I own crypto or should I more specifically own Bitcoin? My answer, if a friend came to me and asked me that, would be, yeah, you probably should, right? But my thing is just be conservative and be realistic about how much of your net worth you have in it. If you have a net worth, just for a round number, if you have a net worth of $100,000, you might consider putting $1,000 or $2,000 in the Bitcoin, right? 1 or 2% of your net worth. If you have a $500,000 net worth, maybe you put in, $5,000 or $10,000, 1 or 2% of your net worth. so on and so forth. If you have $1 million net worth, so on and so forth. If you go look at professional financial advisors, which I'm not, even the most aggressive crypto advisors will usually say that you shouldn't be above 5%. So for example, if you have a net worth of $100,000, that would be $5,000. It's really not that much money, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, oh, that's nothing. What I'm saying is it's not what people think, right? I mean, I have people sometimes on the channel that comment like, I'm missing out. Well, I mean, I have a little over 2 Bitcoin worth of crypto. Like, I actually have a pretty decent amount of my net worth in crypto, right? I mean, if I was to put in 10 or 20, if I bought 10 or 20 Bitcoin back when it fell in March, if I'm being totally transparent, that would have been a pretty significant deviation from what professional advisors would advise me to do, right? They would not like to see me have that much of my net worth tied up in crypto, which is part of the reason I didn't do it, right? Because I knew that it was really more about gambling than it was about being strategic. And with everything going on, I just chickened out. That's the honest to God's truth. I just chickened out, right? But yeah, I mean, strategically, even if you're not a big fan of crypto, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with risking, 1 or 2% of a person's net worth. Now, granted, if it goes to zero, you're going to lose that and it's going to suck and then it's not going to be fun. But it's very unlikely that losing 1 or 2% of a person's net worth is going to significantly impact your life. On the flip side, if people like me are wrong, and if crypto really does explode and become like a mainstream thing, and Bitcoin ends up going up to $100,000 or some crazy number, having that 1 or 2% in there, it might be life changing for you. I don't know. It depends on where you're at in life. If you're somebody that's barely able to make ends meet, and somehow you scrounge up enough money that you buy 1/10 of a Bitcoin, and it goes to $100,000, that extra $10,000 might be life-changing for you, right? And it might not. It depends on where you're at in life. For some people, they make $10,000 a month, so they don't care. Other people, they might make $10,000 a year, right? So I just think that I think the best bet for me is to stay hedged, because I'm not arrogant enough to think that I know what's going to happen, right? So that's the reason that I always hold coins, and I think it's important to talk about that as much as I do, because it's really easy, to not, get FOMO when you already have money in the market. It's like, okay, well, if I'm wrong, I'm still going to make money, right? And the thing is with my portfolio, guys, it's weighted really alt heavy. I posted this on Facebook. It's about 1/4 of it is Bitcoin, right? About 75% of it's alts. So the thing is some people might wonder, why are you holding so many alts versus Bitcoin? Well, here's my theory on this. If I'm wrong and Bitcoin explodes, let's say that Bitcoin goes up to $75,000, right? Which I'm using because before I became skeptical, that's really what I thought was going to happen. I really did think that the next high would be 75,000. There's math that goes into that, but it doesn't matter. Just 75,000, right? Well, where Bitcoin is at now, that's going to be about, under a 6x return, right? Yes, it's 7 times the price, but it's a 600% gain roughly, right? A little less than that. That's really good money, really good return. But if you look at most of these altcoins, most of the altcoins, not all of them, Ethereum's kind of an outlier, but most of the alts are down 80-90% still from where they were versus Bitcoin, right? I'm not just talking about US dollar value, I'm talking about versus Bitcoin. And when I look at alts, to me, right, they actually look like, and I've talked about this in the past, they almost look like they've been in this accumulation period for 2 years. So I do expect at some point that a lot of those alts are going to regain that ground on Bitcoin. And I have a feeling that my roughly 1.75 Bitcoin worth of alts are probably going to be worth more like 5 or 6 Bitcoin someday, right? Forget US dollar value. Just if you're talking strictly Bitcoin, if Bitcoin does, if Bitcoin survives and thrives, I really believe those alts will probably be worth 5 or 6 Bitcoin, right? And then I'll convert them over to Bitcoin, and all is well in the world, right? So I'll end up having 7 or 8 Bitcoin or 6 Bitcoin or whatever the case ends up being. But that's the reason I'm alt heavy, is because most alts, I feel like most alts, the decent alts, are still undervalued. For example, you look at Litecoin. Litecoin's right around $60 or whatever it is. It was $420, right? It was $420 in 2017. You look at Zcash. Zcash got all the way down to like $17 in March. It was $1,000 in 2017. You look at Stellar. Stellar sitting around 10 cents right now. It was 92 cents in 2017. You look at, I mean, the list goes on and on, right? You get what I'm saying. So anyway, that's why I'm alt heavy. I get tempted sometimes, and once in a while I break the rule, and once in a while if alt really goes crazy, I do, sell off some for Bitcoin. So for example, I sold some Tron the other day because I had some Tron left over from 2017 I think I threw $1,000 gamble on it or something crazy. And so when it ran up versus Bitcoin this week, I did sell some. I sold about half of the Tron, which wasn't anywhere near $1,000 worth. It was like, I think it was like $500. It was back to like $500 when it pumped. So I sold like $250 worth of it converted into Bitcoin, right? So I do stuff like that once in a while, but I'm not supposed to. Now I've reset the capital gain on that. Didn't matter so much in that case because it was a loss, but yeah, okay. So also let's talk about, and the video's getting a little bit long, but I'll just kind of jump through this real quick. I'm watching the Dow right now more than I'm watching anything as far as stocks go. I don't like what I'm seeing here, right? This was the line of support. Came up here and tested it on a bearish retest. It's coming up and testing again. It seems to be faltering a little bit, so I'm watching that with a lot of interest. Of course, there's still this gap up here, so maybe it does go higher. If it breaks through this, I think that would be a great sign for the Dow. But I do want to watch this. The other thing I want to watch in the stock market is this, right? Forget this red line. That's that weekly line. We'll turn it off real quick. I don't know why I have two purple lines. Let me get rid of one of them here. So if we draw this downward sloping monthly resistance, if I can get it to there, look at this. We're coming right up to resistance. Now you might be thinking, who cares, James? Who cares? Well, if you guys remember, this was the same way that I was able to, I wouldn't say call the dump, but this is one of the reasons that I was concerned about a dump back in March. Back on March 8th, I posted a chart of the stock market, using these lines saying, hey, everybody needs to, hope this thing gets back above this line quickly. If not, we're in trouble kind of deal. And we didn't. And here's what happened. Right. This was the line. At the time, it looked like this. And it had come up to, you can't see it now, but on this red candle here, it had this wick. It had actually come up on a bearish retest, and that's when I talked about it, and then it just collapsed. So these lines are really, really worth watching. And right now, this is the S&P 500. So you just saw the Dow. The Dow's just below the line. The S&P 500 is just a smidge above the line, but this is a monthly candle. So I want to watch and see, where does this thing close at in 11 days? Right now, it's sitting right at the all-time high. The all-time high was 33.93.50. It's currently 33.89.80, right? So it's sitting right at the all-time high. It did have a gap back here, right here. It filled in its gap, so that's done and over with. It is putting in some bearish-looking divergence, right? So I just want to see, where does the month close at? And, got to be patient. If it blows through this thing, it's probably going to run. It's probably going to, go up quite a bit. I doubt it's going to go through it, close above it, and then suddenly just collapse, right? I would think that it would continue pushing forward and probably eliminate these divergences, but we'll see, all right? So I am watching that on the stock market, and the only other thing I'm really watching, I'm keeping a close eye on the fear and greed index. So stocks are in the greed right now, and if you zoom down to the bottom of this, you can kind of see this level has been a turning point many, many times over the last couple of years before it went back down. Also, if you're looking for a place to buy, it's worth keeping an eye on this chart, because if you notice, every time it gets down here near zero, tends to be a really good spot to look for longs. And then I'm also watching the crypto fear and greed. We're in extreme greed. We've been in extreme greed, and yeah, not what you want to see if you're a bull, right? You don't want to be in extreme greed. Basically, we're in the June 2019 levels. The only thing we're lacking is that blow off top where it shot up to 95. So overall, I guess it's more of the same for me. I have been taking a lot more longs than I have shorts lately, just because the trend has been up and it has been really strong. So it's been a lot easier to go long than it has been go short. I've kind of gotten to the point where going short on Bitcoin, it's not something I like to do. And the main reason I don't like to do it, guys, is because Bitcoin does not trend well, right? It trends up really well, right? It's really easy to find an uptrend. It's really easy to get in it and ride it. You might get in halfway through and still ride that last half or whatever the case is. It's really difficult to short a downtrend in Bitcoin because it doesn't really trend. What it does is it gets to a point and then it just collapses. It's all of a sudden, it's just boom, collapses, right? So if you want to short Bitcoin, a lot of times what you have to do is you have to basically try to do what's called a reversal trade, where you're fighting the trend. And I've done that. For the last couple of years. I've really been playing shorts more than longs up until recently. It's just much more difficult, right? It's really much more difficult to do that because in some sense you're almost guessing. You're almost guessing, okay, this is the top, right? This is where it's going to reverse at. And it's just difficult. And it's, when you're wrong, it's expensive because it can often shoot up fast and hard and stop you out in the blink of an eye. On the flip side, when you're going long, look at this. It throws these softballs, comes down. Okay, now you got a trend, comes down. Oh, look at that. Perfect touch, right? Okay, so if you long at 11.5, you get to ride it up to 12.4, right? 12.5. And it does that over and over again, right? It's just a lot friggin' easier to long it than it is to short it. So here recently, I've just enjoyed longing Bitcoin, even as a bear. And again, I know it sounds funny to people. It's like, how can you be bearish and be long? Because my trades are smaller time frame. I don't care. It doesn't matter whether Bitcoin's worth $1 million someday or whether it's worth nothing someday. All it matters is what it's worth when I enter my trade and when I exit my trade, because I'm usually trading with US Tether, and I hate Tether, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into that whole speech, but that's, the portal that I have to trade it on Bybit. Is I don't want to hold Bitcoin to trade because then I'm, at the whims of its value. So instead I put money in Tether and I trade with high leverage, right? So that I don't have to keep much cash in Tether. But this video is getting fairly long. It's almost 40 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's kind of a little bit of a brain dump because I haven't done a video in 4 or 5 days. So I wanted to do one. I'm not going to edit this video because I made sure to close out any windows that had personal information in them, which is a lot easier than editing. So if I did make some mistakes, I apologize for that. But I want to wrap up by saying this, guys. Again, and I can't stress this enough, I am just some guy sitting in a spare bedroom. That is not a disclaimer. That is the God's honest truth. Remember that, right, when you watch these videos. I've been doing this stuff for about 3.5 years. I've done fairly well at it, but I do not have a crystal ball. My earnings or my income comes from using proper risk management. It comes from using proper setups, proper entries, etc. It does not come from, quote unquote, knowing what Bitcoin is going to do. That is more of like a hobby, right? Analyzing Bitcoin's big moves, it's like a hobby. No one knows where it's going, right? It's all a big guess on these larger time frames. It's all it is. Even the fact that I got the $4,200 call right, guys, just a guess, right? There was a level that made sense. I guessed it would go there. It did. It's not like I made a ton of money. It's not like I said, okay, well, I'm going to short Bitcoin at 13K and ride it to 4K. I wish, right? But I didn't do that, right? I traded all the way up and down the whole way there. So please, don't be investing your money or making trade decisions because of something in a video. The videos are meant to open your eyes, show you some possibilities, and get you thinking about some things. It's not meant to say, well, James is short, I'm going to go short too. Or James is, bullish, I'm going to go long. That's not what they're for, right? If I was that good, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be a trillionaire and I wouldn't need to do YouTube videos, would I? Right? I'd be living on an island somewhere. God's honest truth, if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't even have a computer, right? I'm not a big fan of computers. I've been sitting at one for 15 years. 20 years, I guess now. So, I'm like anybody else. I'm right sometimes, I'm wrong sometimes. You need to keep that in mind, all right? So, again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment. That helps tremendously. And if you haven't already, check the description for a link where you can join the Patron. All right, this is James with Crypto Common Sense, reminding you to please trade safe.